his ex-wife accidentally sent a photo of twin babies he never knew existed. You're throwing away everything we've built together for some secret family? Vivian's voice trembled with fury over the phone. This is absurd, Maxwell. Hire a nanny. Set up a trust fund. You don't need to derail your entire life, our life, for this. Maxwell Reed stared at the photograph on his phone. Two sleeping infants with his distinctive cleft chin, as he replied, "They're not an inconvenience to be managed, Vivian. They're my children. Children you didn't know existed until yesterday. Children she kept from you deliberately." Vivian's composure shattered completely. This is exactly what she wants. To pull you back into her life now that you're successful. Now that you're with someone else. This isn't about Olivia, Maxwell said, though the image of his ex-wife's face when she placed his son in his arms for the first time flashed through his mind. This is about Eliza and Alexander, and the father I want to be to them. Have you ever wondered what would happen if your perfectly planned life was upended by a single text message? If everything you thought mattered suddenly paled in comparison to something you never knew you wanted? This is the story of how one of America's most powerful CEOs discovered that success means nothing without the right people to share it with. Hi, my beautiful sisters. Sometimes life takes unexpected turns that break our hearts, but those same turns can lead us to our greatest blessings. When you feel like you're carrying the weight of the world alone, remember that strength isn't about never falling. It's about rising every time with grace and dignity. Your worth isn't measured by someone else's inability to see it. Trust that everything happens for a reason, and the right people will recognize the treasure that you are. You were made to shine, even through sharing a remarkable story about second chances, unexpected gifts, and the courage to redefine what truly matters in life. If you've ever had your world turned upside, the champagne flutes clinked delicately as Maxwell Reed raised his glass to toast his fiancée beneath the crystal chandeliers of the Pinnacle, the exclusive rooftop restaurant he owned in downtown Manhattan. Cameras flashed, capturing the perfect tableau of power and romance. The billionaire tech mogul and the elegant art curator whose 3-month whirlwind courtship had captivated the city's elite social circles. To new beginnings, Maxwell said, his voice carrying the practiced confidence that had helped build Reed Innovations into a global empire. At 42, he embodied success, impeccably tailored Tom Ford suit, the distinguished touch of silver at his temples contrasting with otherwise dark hair, and the relaxed posture of a man accustomed to controlling every variable in his world. Vivian smiled, her emerald engagement ring catching the light as she raised her glass. "To us," she replied, the picture of sophisticated happiness. No one watching would have guessed that in less than 24 hours, the engagement would be over, the carefully orchestrated future Maxwell had planned shattered by a single photograph sent to the wrong number. Maxwell Reed had built his life on calculated decisions. Every acquisition, every investment, every relationship had been carefully evaluated for maximum return. His engagement to Vivian Laurent, the brilliant curator at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, had followed the same pattern. A strategic alliance between two ambitious individuals with compatible goals and complementary public images. The Times wants an exclusive for their Sunday Style section, Vivian mentioned as they left the restaurant, her arm linked through his. And Vanity Fair is sending their top photographer to the announcement party tomorrow. Perfect, Maxwell nodded, mentally adding these details to the meticulously planned rollout of their engagement. 300 guests at the Metropolitan Museum, champagne from his vineyard in Napa, an orchestra playing their carefully selected song. Everything designed to cement their status as Manhattan's power couple. Later that evening, as Vivian departed for her final dress fitting, Maxwell retreated to his penthouse office. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city he'd conquered, a skyline dotted with buildings housing companies he'd acquired, outmaneuvered, or partnered with during his 15-year rise to the top. "The quarterly projections look promising, sir," his assistant noted before leaving him to review the reports, particularly the Asian expansion. Maxwell settled into his leather chair, satisfaction washing over him as he scanned the numbers. Reed Innovations was projecting its most profitable quarter yet. The board was pleased. The market was responding favorably to their latest product announcements. And tomorrow, He would announce his engagement to a woman who perfectly complemented his public persona. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan, until his phone chimed with a notification. The name that appeared on his screen sent an unexpected jolt through him. Olivia, his ex-wife, a name he hadn't seen in his notifications for nearly 2 years. For a moment, his finger hovered over the screen, tempted to delete the message unread. Their divorce had been finalized 18 months ago after 5 turbulent years of marriage, a relationship that had begun with passionate intensity and ended in cold silence. The settlement had been generous enough to ensure Olivia's comfortable disappearance from his life, the prenuptial agreement solid enough to protect his empire. There was no reason for contact now. Curiosity won. He opened the message. James, the twins are finally sleeping at the same time. They look so much like their father it's almost eerie. 7 months old today and already showing that Reed determination. Live. Attached was a photograph of 2 infants sleeping peacefully in matching cribs. 2 infants with the distinctive cleft chin that Maxwell saw every morning in his mirror. The same chin that appeared in portraits of his father and grandfather hanging in the Reed family estate. The world tilted beneath him. Twins. 7 months old. The timing aligned perfectly with their separation, with the last night they'd spent together before lawyers and accusations and final goodbyes. Children he never knew existed. Maxwell stared at the photo until his vision blurred, emotions cycling through him with hurricane force. Shock, disbelief, rage, wonder. Questions hammered at his consciousness. How could she keep this from him? Who was James? Why reveal this now accidentally, when she clearly hadn't intended him to know? His hand shook as he called his head of security. Find Olivia Reed. He paused, correcting himself. Olivia Winters. Now, I need her current address, phone numbers, everything. Priority override on all other projects. Within an hour, he had what he needed. Olivia had relocated to Seattle, about as far from New York as she could get without leaving the continental United States. She had purchased a modest house in a family-friendly neighborhood 6 months ago. No employment records, but her social media, set to private but easily accessed by his security team, showed occasional mentions of freelance graphic design work. And nowhere in any of the information gathered was there mention of twins. Her profiles were devoid of baby photos or parenting references. No birth announcements. Nothing. She had hidden them completely. The realization struck him with physical force. Olivia, who had once claimed to want nothing more than a family with him, had concealed his children's existence. Had she intended to keep them secret forever? To raise them without any knowledge of their father? The James in her text must be her new partner. Someone else raising his children. If you've ever had a moment that completely altered your life's trajectory, give this video a thumbs up. Sometimes the universe has a way of redirecting us when we least expect it. Maxwell canceled his remaining meetings with a terse email and poured himself 3 fingers of scotch, staring at the city skyline as night fell. The engagement party was tomorrow evening, a lavish affair for 300 guests at the Metropolitan Museum, with press coverage arranged and a feature planned for Vanity Fair. Vivian would be expecting him for dinner in an hour. They had reservations at Le Bernardin, where they would discuss final details for the party and their upcoming Mediterranean honeymoon. Instead, he found himself booking a private flight to Seattle, scheduled to depart at dawn. The call to Vivian was brief, a fabricated emergency requiring his immediate attention. She was understanding, accustomed to the demands of dating a CEO whose empire required constant tending. I'll handle the last-minute details for tomorrow, she assured him. Just be back in time to slip into your tuxedo. He promised he would, the lie bitter on his tongue. As his private jet soared above the clouds, Maxwell found himself staring at the photograph of the twins, unable to tear his eyes away from their peaceful faces. Memories of Olivia flooded back. Not the cold, distant woman she'd become in their final year of marriage, but the vibrant, passionate woman who had once been his equal and partner. They had met at a charity auction where her graphic design firm was being honored for their pro bono work. Unlike the socialites and business connections who typically surrounded him, Olivia had challenged him, questioned his assumptions, made him laugh with her quick wit and unfiltered observations. You know, for a billionaire, you're surprisingly bad at reading people, she'd told him on their third date, her brown eyes sparkling with amusement. That waiter has been giving you death glares all night because you interrupted him 3 times. Her honesty had been refreshing in a world of yes-men and sycophants. Her talent had been undeniable, her designs eventually becoming the new visual identity for Reed Innovations during their marriage. And her love had been transformative, showing him a warmth and connection he'd never experienced in his achievement-oriented upbringing. Until it all fell apart. Until his expanding empire demanded more of his time and attention. Until board meetings and international acquisitions took precedence over anniversary dinners and weekend getaways. Until Olivia became another obligation in his calendar rather than the center of his world. When did I become just another asset in your portfolio, Maxwell? She had asked during one of their final arguments, her voice thick with hurt. Something to be managed and maintained rather than loved? He hadn't had an answer then. He'd retreated into the cold efficiency that had served him so well in business, eventually suggesting they end a marriage that no longer served either of their needs. Our marriage is an inefficient allocation of resources, he had told her, the corporate language a shield against the pain of failure. We want different things now. What he hadn't known was that she had been carrying his children when he spoke those words. The Seattle morning greeted him with characteristic drizzle as his driver navigated the residential streets of Olivia's neighborhood. The house was smaller than he expected, a blue Craftsman with a tidy garden and a swing set visible in the backyard. Nothing like the luxury penthouse they had shared in Manhattan. Maxwell sat in the car for several minutes, gathering his composure. He had rehearsed this confrontation throughout the sleepless flight, cycling between cold fury and calculated restraint. But now, faced with the reality of the moment, he found himself unprepared for the emotion tightening his chest. He was a father, had been for 7 months without knowing. The front door opened before he reached it. Olivia stood in the doorway, her expression a complex mixture of resignation and defiance. She looked different than he remembered. Her once sleek dark hair now fell in natural waves past her shoulders, and her designer wardrobe had been replaced by simple jeans and a soft sweater. But her eyes were the same deep brown that had once captivated him across a crowded gallery opening. I wondered how long it would take you to show up, she said quietly. You knew you sent that text to me instead of James. His voice remained controlled despite the anger simmering beneath. I realized my mistake immediately. She stepped back, a silent invitation to enter. Come in. They're napping, but they'll be awake soon. The interior was warm and lived in, with none of the sterile perfection Olivia had maintained in their Manhattan home. Toys were organized in colorful bins. A playpen occupied one corner of the living room. Photos lined the walls. Olivia pregnant, Olivia in a hospital bed holding 2 bundles, the twins at various stages of their short lives. A life documented without him. Why? The question contained multitudes. Why hide them? Why tell him now, even accidentally? Why deny him knowledge of his own children? Olivia sank onto the sofa, suddenly looking exhausted. You made it very clear that children weren't part of your plan, Maxwell. Not with your company expanding internationally, not with the pressure from your board. Perhaps in a few years, you always said. That didn't give you the right to. I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after you told me you wanted a divorce, she interrupted. 2 weeks after you explained, in that perfectly reasonable voice you use when firing people, that our marriage was an inefficient allocation of resources. The words hit their mark. He had said that, had reduced their 5 years together to a business decision that wasn't yielding adequate returns. It had been easier that way, cleaner than acknowledging the growing distance between them, the way his work had consumed him until Olivia had become just another appointment in his calendar. You should have told me. Would it have changed anything? Her gaze was steady, challenging. Would you have canceled the divorce? Suddenly embraced fatherhood? Or would you have seen the pregnancy as an inconvenience, a complication in your carefully structured life? Maxwell opened his mouth to protest, then closed it again. The truth was, he didn't know what he would have done. The Maxwell Reed of 18 months ago had been laser-focused on expanding his company globally, on proving himself to the board, on building the empire that now bore his name. Children had been a theoretical future consideration, not an immediate priority. "I had a right to know," he said finally, his voice softer. "Whatever decision I might have made, I deserved the chance to make it." Olivia's expression softened slightly. "Maybe you're right, but I was hurt and afraid, Maxwell. You had just told me our marriage wasn't worth the investment. How was I supposed to believe you'd invest in our children?" Before he could answer, a cry sounded from down the hall, quickly joined by a second. Olivia rose immediately, her body responding to the sound with practiced efficiency. "Wait here," she said, but Maxwell followed her down the hallway to a nursery painted in soft greens and yellows. 2 cribs, 2 babies now fully awake and demanding attention. A boy and a girl, both with his dark hair and Olivia's delicate features. A perfect blend of their parents. His children. Maxwell stopped in the doorway, momentarily paralyzed by the reality before him. Olivia lifted the girl first, murmuring soothing words as she settled her against her shoulder, then reached for the boy. "This is Eliza," she said, nodding to the baby girl watching him with solemn curiosity. "And this is Alexander. They're usually good nappers, but they sense when something's different." "They're beautiful," he said, the words inadequate for the emotion swelling in his chest. "Would you like to hold one of them?" Olivia's offer surprised him. Despite everything, she wasn't denying him this moment. He nodded, and she carefully transferred Alexander to his arms, showing him how to support the baby's head. The weight of his son against his chest unlocked something within him, a fierce, protective instinct he hadn't known he possessed. "I have a right to know my children," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion, "to be part of their lives. And they have a right to a father who's present, who prioritizes them above quarterly earnings and market expansion." Olivia's tone wasn't accusatory, merely matter of fact. "Can you be that father, Maxwell? Because these 2 deserve nothing less." The question hung between them as Alexander grabbed at Maxwell's tie with surprising strength, gurgling happily at his new toy. Eliza watched from her mother's arms, as if assessing the stranger who shared her determined chin. In that moment, looking into his son's trusting eyes, Maxwell confronted truths he had long avoided. His own father had been distant, measuring affection in achievements and approval in performance metrics. Maxwell had sworn he would be different if he ever had children, yet he had built a life that mirrored his father's priorities. Work above all, relationships as strategic alliances rather than emotional connections. Even his engagement to Vivian had been, if he was honest with himself, more about acquiring the perfect partner to complement his public image than about love. "I don't know," he admitted finally, the words costing him more than any business concession ever had. "But I want to try." Olivia's expression softened slightly. "That's more honesty than you showed in our last year of marriage." "Who is James?" The question had burned in him since reading the text. "My brother. He moved to Seattle to help me with the twins." A small smile touched her lips. "There is no other man, Maxwell. I've been a little busy." Relief washed through him, followed immediately by shame at his assumption. Of course Olivia wouldn't have replaced him so quickly, wouldn't have invited another man to claim his children. That had been his insecurity speaking, his fear that he was as replaceable in his children's lives as he had made Olivia in his. "We need to talk about arrangements," he said, shifting into the familiar territory of negotiation. "Visitation, support, legal recognition." "We will," Olivia interrupted gently, "but not today. Today is about you meeting them, beginning to understand what's at stake." Alexander yawned against his chest, tiny fingers still clutching his tie. The simple trust of it humbled him. "I'm engaged," he said suddenly, the reality of his situation crashing back. "The announcement party is tonight." Olivia took this information with remarkable composure. "Congratulations. Is she prepared to be a stepmother to 7-month-old twins?" The question crystallized everything. Vivian, with her carefully curated life and aversion to disorder, had once mentioned that children were something she might consider eventually, perhaps after establishing her curatorial legacy. She valued their shared aesthetic, their compatible ambitions, their mutual understanding of power and its privileges. He tried to imagine her reaction to this revelation, to instant fatherhood and the complications it would bring to their meticulously planned future, to shared holidays with his ex-wife, to the messy, unpredictable reality of parenting. "No," he said finally, "she isn't." "And you?" Olivia asked, her gaze direct. "Are you prepared to be a father now, not eventually? Because that's what they need." If you're wondering what choice Maxwell made in that pivotal moment, give this video a thumbs up. Sometimes the most important decisions in life aren't the ones we plan for, but the ones that are thrust upon us unexpectedly. Maxwell looked down at his son, now drifting back to sleep against his chest, and across to his daughter watching him with her mother's thoughtful eyes. Something shifted within him, priorities rearranging themselves with tectonic force. "I'm staying in Seattle for a while," he said, the decision forming as he spoke it. "I'll have my assistant cancel the party and send my apologies to the guests. And Vivian? I'll call her personally. It was the least he owed her. She deserves to understand why I can't go through with the wedding." Olivia nodded, neither triumphant nor sympathetic. "There's a guest room upstairs. You're welcome to stay here while you look for something more permanent nearby. It would give you time with the twins every day." The offer stunned him. After everything, she was willing to facilitate his relationship with their children, to help him become the father they deserved. "Thank you," he said, the words inadequate for the gift she was offering. "I don't deserve your generosity." "This isn't about what you deserve," Olivia replied simply. "It's about what Eliza and Alexander deserve. They should know their father, the real man behind the business empire and public image. I'm just creating the opportunity for that to happen." As if understanding the significance of the moment, Alexander stirred against his chest, tiny hand reaching up to pat Maxwell's face with innocent curiosity. The gesture, so small yet so profound, sealed his decision. The call to Vivian came later that evening, after he had spent hours learning his children's routines, marveling at their distinct personalities already emerging, and having the most honest conversation with Olivia that they'd shared in years. "There's been a development," he began, standing in the guest room that would be his temporary home. "Something that changes everything." As he explained about the twins, about his decision to remain in Seattle indefinitely to become part of their lives, Vivian's initial confusion gave way to cold fury. "You're throwing away everything we've built together for some secret family?" Her voice rose with disbelief. "This is absurd, Maxwell. Hire a nanny. Set up a trust fund. You don't need to derail your entire life, our life, for this." Her reaction confirmed what he had already known. "They're not an inconvenience to be managed, Vivian. They're my children. Children you didn't know existed until yesterday. Children she kept from you deliberately." Vivian's composure cracked entirely. This is exactly what she wants. To pull you back into her life now that you're successful, now that you're with someone else. "This isn't about Olivia," Maxwell said, though he understood why Vivian would think so. "This is about Eliza and Alexander, and the father I want to be to them." The silence that followed was heavy with finality. When Vivian spoke again, her voice was controlled, distant. "I won't wait for you to work through this midlife crisis or guilt trip or whatever this is. The engagement is off. I'll have your things sent to Seattle." "I'm sorry," he offered, knowing it was insufficient. "You deserve someone whose priorities align with yours. Don't patronize me, Maxwell." The line went dead. He stood at the window afterward, looking out at the unfamiliar Seattle skyline, so different from the Manhattan view he'd woken to for the past 15 years. His phone buzzed continuously with messages from his assistant, his PR team, his board members, all demanding explanations for his sudden disappearance and the canceled engagement party. For the first time in his adult life, Maxwell Reed let the business world spin without his immediate attention. Downstairs, His children were being bathed and readied for bed. His children, who would never remember this day but whose lives would be shaped by the decision he had made. The next morning, Maxwell woke to unfamiliar sounds. The gentle patter of rain against windows, the distant cooing of babies, the soft padding of feet in the hallway. For a moment, disorientation gripped him. Then reality flooded back. Seattle, Olivia, the twins, his new life. He dressed quickly in yesterday's clothes, making a mental note to have his assistant arrange for some of his belongings to be shipped from New York. When he descended the stairs, he found Olivia in the kitchen, Eliza strapped to her chest in a baby carrier while she prepared bottles with practiced efficiency. "Alexander is still sleeping," she said by way of greeting. "There's coffee in the pot. I remember you take it black." "Thank you." The domesticity of the moment struck him, so different from his usual mornings of protein shakes delivered by his personal chef and briefings from his executive assistant. "I need to make some calls today, arrange for my absence from New York. Is there somewhere I can work without disturbing you and the twins?" "There's a small office off the living room. James uses it when he's here, but he's visiting friends in Portland this week." Olivia tested the temperature of the formula on her wrist. "Feel free to use it." Maxwell nodded, pouring himself coffee. "I appreciate your accommodation, Olivia. I know this situation isn't what either of us planned." A small smile touched her lips. "Twins weren't exactly in my 5-year strategic plan either. Sometimes life has other ideas." The gentle teasing, reminiscent of their early relationship, caught him off guard. For a moment, he glimpsed the woman he'd fallen in love with, the one whose quick wit and warmth had broken through his carefully constructed walls. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday," he ventured, "about the kind of father they deserve. I want you to know I'm committed to figuring that out, to being present in their lives in whatever way is best for them." Olivia studied him, her expression thoughtful. "That's a good start. But Maxwell, parenting isn't a business acquisition. You can't just decide to do it and expect immediate results. It's messy and exhausting and often thankless. There will be days when you question every choice you've made." "I understand that." "Do you?" Her gaze was direct. "Because the Maxwell Reed I knew excelled at beginning projects but often lost interest when they became complicated or didn't yield immediate returns." The observation stung, partly because it contained truth he'd never acknowledged. His business success had come from identifying opportunities, implementing solutions, and moving on to the next challenge. Relationships, real, enduring connections, had never been his strength. "I'm not the same man I was when we were married," he said quietly. "At least, I don't want to be." Before Olivia could respond, a cry sounded from upstairs. "That's Alexander," she said, handing him the prepared bottle. "Would you like to feed him while I take care of Eliza?" The simple request, the trust it implied, moved him unexpectedly. "Yes, I would." The next weeks unfolded in a pattern unlike anything Maxwell had experienced. Mornings began with the twin schedule, not the stock market opening. Days were measured in feedings and naps, not meetings and conference calls. Nights ended with bedtime stories instead of business dinners. He converted the guest room into a makeshift office, conducting video conferences while keeping one eye on Alexander playing on a blanket beside him. He learned to change diapers with the same precision he once applied to contract negotiations. He discovered that Eliza would only fall asleep if carried while walking counterclockwise around the nursery, a quirk that had him pacing circles at 3 a.m., his designer shoes long since replaced by comfortable slippers. Through it all, he watched Olivia, her patience, her creativity, her seemingly endless capacity to anticipate the twins' needs. She had transformed from the polished professional he'd married into something more authentic, more grounded. Motherhood suited her in a way that surprised him, revealing strengths he'd never fully appreciated during their marriage. You're on the porch after putting the twins down, the rare clear Seattle night revealing a sky full of stars. "Sorry," Maxwell said, embarrassed at being caught. "I was just thinking about how different you seem here." "Different how?" "More yourself. In New York, we were both always performing to some extent. You as the perfect corporate wife, me as the driven CEO. Here, you seem more at peace." Olivia considered this, sipping her tea. Becoming a mother changed me. When you're responsible for two tiny humans who depend on you completely, the superficial things fall away. What matters is being present, being authentic. I'm beginning to understand that, Maxwell admitted. These past weeks have been illuminating. And your company? Your board can't be happy about your extended absence. They're adjusting. I've appointed my COO as acting CEO for the quarter. The Asian expansion is proceeding on schedule. The world of Reed Innovations continues to turn without my constant attention. He smiled ruefully. A humbling realization. And Vivian? She's given an exclusive interview to Vanity Fair. Apparently, I'm a commitment-phobic workaholic who used the twins as an excuse to escape marriage. He shrugged. Not entirely inaccurate, if I'm honest. Olivia laughed, the sound warming something in his chest. The Maxwell Reed I knew would never have admitted that. The Maxwell Reed you knew was afraid of failure, of vulnerability. He met her gaze directly, of needing anyone. The admission hung between them, more honest than anything he'd said during their marriage. Olivia's expression softened, but before she could respond, her phone chimed with a text. It's James, she said, checking the message. He's coming back tomorrow. I should prepare his room. The moment broken, Maxwell nodded and stood. I'll help you with the twins' morning routine, then start looking for an apartment nearby. I've imposed on your hospitality long enough. You don't have to rush, Olivia said, surprising him. James can stay in the guest room downstairs. The twins are just getting used to having you here every day. The invitation, to stay, to continue building this fragile new routine, filled him with unexpected hope. If you're sure. I am. She rose, pausing beside him. Whatever happened between us, Maxwell, you're their father. Seeing you with them these past weeks. You're trying. Really trying. That matters. Impulsively, he reached for her hand. A gesture of gratitude that became something more as their fingers intertwined. For a moment, they stood connected, the night air cool around them, the distant sound of the city a backdrop to the quiet intimacy of the moment. Thank you, he said simply, for giving me this chance. Olivia squeezed his hand once before releasing it. Good night, Maxwell. Good night, Olivia. As she disappeared inside, Maxwell remained on the porch, contemplating the strange turn his life had taken. A month ago, he had been preparing to announce his engagement to a woman who complemented his public image perfectly. Now, he was living in his ex-wife's home, learning to be a father to twins he hadn't known existed, and discovering that the life he'd built in New York felt increasingly hollow compared to the authentic connections he was forming here. Most surprising of all was the realization that the feelings he'd once had for Olivia, feelings he'd buried beneath ambition and pride, were resurfacing in unexpected ways. Not the passionate intensity of their early relationship, but something deeper, more grounded in mutual respect and shared purpose. If you believe that sometimes life's greatest gifts come disguised as its biggest disruptions, give this video a thumbs up. And if you're enjoying this story of unexpected matters in life, the arrival of James brought another dimension to their evolving family dynamic. Olivia's brother, a laid-back software developer with an easy laugh, took the changes in stride. So you're the infamous Maxwell Reed, he said when they first met, sizing him up with a gaze remarkably similar to his sister's. The twins definitely got your chin. And thankfully, Olivia's temperament, Maxwell replied, earning a surprised laugh from both siblings. James's presence might have complicated things, but instead, it eased the transition. He offered Maxwell insights into Olivia's life since the divorce, shared stories of the twins' early months, and most importantly, treated him not as an intruder but as a welcome addition to their unconventional household. She was terrified when she found out it was twins, James confided one evening as they assembled a pair of high chairs Maxwell had ordered. Not about handling two babies. Liv has always been capable of anything she sets her mind to, but about doing it alone. She wasn't alone. She had you, Maxwell pointed out, tightening a screw with perhaps more force than necessary. It's not the same as having their father, James said simply. She never said it, but I know she struggled with her decision not to tell you. The revelation stayed with Maxwell, coloring his interactions with Olivia in the days that followed. He began to notice the moments when exhaustion crept into her eyes, the way she sometimes stared at old photos when she thought no one was watching, the quiet resilience that had carried her through pregnancy and early motherhood without the support she deserved. 3 months into his Seattle stay, Maxwell finalized the purchase of a house just 2 streets over from Olivia's, close enough for daily involvement with the twins, but respecting the boundaries they were still navigating. The night before he was scheduled to move in, he found Olivia in the nursery, watching the sleeping twins with a pensive expression. "Penny, for your thoughts," he said softly, joining her by the cribs. "I was just thinking about how much they've changed since you arrived," she replied. "Alexander is so much more confident, and Eliza actually lets other people hold her now." "They're remarkable," Maxwell agreed. "But that's because of you, Olivia, the foundation you've given them." She turned to him, moonlight from the window illuminating her face. "We did make beautiful children, didn't we?" "We did." He hesitated, then added, "I've been thinking about what James told me, about your decision not to tell me about the pregnancy." Olivia tensed slightly. "James talks too much. He loves you. He was trying to help me understand." Maxwell took a deep breath. "I want you to know that I get it now, why you kept them from me. I wasn't ready to be the father they deserved. And now I can't imagine my life without them. Without this." He gestured to encompass the nursery, the sleeping twins, the life they'd been building. "Without you." The words hung between them, more vulnerable than any he'd spoken during their marriage. Olivia's eyes widened slightly, searching his face for any sign of insincerity. "Maxwell, I'm not asking for anything," he clarified quickly. "I just wanted you to know that these months have changed me. You've changed me. Seeing you as a mother, understanding what you've sacrificed for them. I've never admired anyone more." Olivia's expression softened. "You've changed too." The Maxwell Reed who just arrived in Seattle would never have admitted that. The Maxwell Reed who just arrived in Seattle was still hiding behind his success, using it as a shield against real connection. He smiled ruefully. "The twins don't care about my net worth or my market position. They just want me present, engaged. That's all I ever wanted too," Olivia said quietly. The admission created a moment of perfect understanding between them, an acknowledgement of where they had failed before, and perhaps a glimpse of what might still be possible. The following weeks brought a new rhythm to their lives. Maxwell settled into his house but spent most days at Olivia's, participating in the twins' routines while maintaining the space they all needed to adjust. His business continued to thrive under his remote leadership, though the board had made their displeasure clear about his extended absence from New York. "They're threatening to replace me if I don't return by the quarterly meeting," he mentioned casually one afternoon as he and Olivia watched the twins explore the backyard playground he'd had installed. "Will you go back?" she asked, her tone carefully neutral. "For the meeting, yes, but not permanently." He turned to face her fully. "My life is here now, Olivia, with Eliza and Alexander. I can run Reed Innovations from Seattle, or I can step down as CEO and remain as chairman. Either way, I'm not leaving them." The conviction in his voice must have reached something in Olivia, because her careful neutrality gave way to a smile that reminded him of their early days together. Open, genuine, without the guarded quality that had characterized their recent interactions. "They'll be glad to hear that," she said. "They've gotten used to having their father around." "Just them?" The question slipped out before he could reconsider. Olivia's gaze met his, steady and clear. "No, not just them." It was the first acknowledgement of the shifting dynamic between them, the gradual rebuilding of trust, the rediscovery of the connection that had brought them together initially, before ambition and neglect had torn them apart. The twins' first birthday marked another milestone. Maxwell insisted on hosting the celebration at his house, transforming the backyard into a whimsical wonderland complete with a petting zoo, bubble machines, and a cake larger than the birthday boy and girl combined. "This is excessive," Olivia laughed as she surveyed the elaborate setup. "They won't remember any of it." "But we will," Maxwell replied. Their first birthday. I wasn't there for their birth, Olivia. Let me have this. Something in his tone must have conveyed the depth of his regret, because her teasing smile softened into understanding. You're right, and it's beautiful. Thank you for doing this for them. The party itself was small, just James, a few neighbors with children, and Olivia's closest friends from Seattle. Maxwell had invited his parents, hoping to introduce them to their grandchildren, but they had declined, still uncomfortable with the circumstances of the twins' birth and his broken engagement. Their loss. Kids are the best thing that ever happened to you. They are, Maxwell agreed, watching as Olivia helped Eliza and Alexander blow out their candles. But not the only good thing. James followed his gaze to Olivia, then clapped him on the shoulder. About time you figured that out. Question is, what are you going to do about it? The answer came to Maxwell later that evening, after the guests had departed and the twins had been put to bed, exhausted from the day's excitement. He and Olivia sat on his back porch, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. I've been thinking about us, he said finally, breaking the comfortable silence. About what went wrong and what might be different now. Olivia set down her wine glass, giving him her full attention. That's a big conversation. It is, but I think we're ready for it. He turned to face her. I failed you during our marriage, Olivia. I prioritized success over our relationship. I treated you as an accessory to my life rather than a partner in it. We both made mistakes, she acknowledged. I withdrew instead of fighting for what I needed. I let resentment build instead of demanding change. But my neglect created the environment for that resentment, Maxwell insisted. And then, when you needed me most, when you were carrying our children, I wasn't someone you could trust with that miracle. Olivia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I should have told you. Whatever your reaction might have been, you deserved to know. We can't change the past, Maxwell said gently. But these months with you and the twins have shown me what truly matters. Not acquisitions or market share or public image, but family, connection, love. The word hung between them, weighted with history and possibility. What are you saying, Maxwell? Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm saying that I never stopped loving you. Even when I convinced myself our marriage was over, even when I proposed to Vivian, there was a part of me that belonged to you. He reached for her hand. I'm not asking for us to rush back into anything. We're different people now. But I'd like the chance to know the woman you've become, to see if we might build something new, something better, together. For a long moment, Olivia was silent, her fingers intertwined with his, her expression thoughtful. Then, with characteristic directness, she asked, And if I'm not ready? If I need more time to trust that this change in you is permanent? Then I'll wait, Maxwell said simply. I'll be the best father I can be to our children, the best friend I can be to you, and I'll prove every day that I'm not the man who let you go. The sincerity in his voice must have reached her, because Olivia's expression softened. I'm not the same woman either, Maxwell. Motherhood has changed me. I'm more cautious, more protective of my heart, and of the twins. I understand that. But, she continued, a small smile playing at her lips, I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought about it, about us, about what might be possible now that we've both grown. Hope bloomed in Maxwell's chest. So where does that leave us? Taking it one day at a time, Olivia replied. Building trust. Seeing if what we feel now can grow into something lasting. It wasn't the dramatic reconciliation he might have scripted in his more optimistic moments, but it was honest, real. And in that moment, Maxwell understood that real connection, the kind that endured beyond passion and novelty, was built on precisely this kind of authentic foundation. I can work with that, he said, squeezing her hand gently. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn evening, Maxwell Reed married Olivia Winters for the second time. Unlike their first wedding, an elaborate affair with 500 guests at the Plaza Hotel, this ceremony took place in the backyard of their new home, a spacious property halfway between his house and hers, with room for the twins to grow and play. Only 30 guests witnessed their vows, but among them were the people who mattered most. James, beaming with pride as he walked his sister down the aisle. The twins, now 18 months old, serving as ring bearer and flower girl with considerable assistance from the best man. Colleagues who had become friends. Neighbors who had welcomed them into the community. Second chances are rare, Maxwell said as they exchanged vows they had written themselves. But you and our children have given me the greatest one of all. The chance to discover what truly matters, to build a life based on love rather than achievement, to become the man you always deserved. We've both changed, Olivia replied, her eyes shining with tears and joy. But some things remain constant. The connection we share, the family we've created, my belief in who we can be together. As they sealed their vows with a kiss, the twins clapping delightedly from their uncle's arms, Maxwell Reed, billionaire CEO, business titan, and now, most importantly, husband and father, understood that the text message that had upended his carefully planned life had been the greatest gift he'd ever received. Not because it had given him children he hadn't known existed, though they were miraculous beyond measure. Not because it had saved him from a marriage based on compatibility rather than love, though that rescue had been necessary. But because it had given him the chance to rediscover the man he was meant to be. A man defined not by his wealth or power, but by his capacity to love, to grow, and to prioritize the connections that make life truly meaningful. If the story touched your heart, please below. Have you ever experienced a moment that completely changed your life's direction? Do you believe in second chances and the power of growth to heal old wounds? Remember that sometimes our greatest blessings come disguised as our biggest disruptions, and the path to true happiness often looks nothing like the one we originally planned. Until you that it's never too late to rewrite your story